This is Journal to Ear, where what's written meets what's spoken. New episodes every Wednesday. Let's talk. This is Journal to Ear. Welcome back to Journal to Ear. I'm Rose, and this is a place where we stop performing healing and start telling the truth about it. Today's episode is called The Loneliness of Becoming. And I think this is one of the hardest parts of healing that nobody really prepares you for because everybody talks about growth like it's beautiful, like it's empowering, like it's this glowing transformation. But nobody really talks about the grief that comes with becoming someone new. Nobody talks about how lonely it feels when you start outgrowing survival versions of yourself. There comes a point in healing where you stop doing what you used to do. You stop over explaining, you stop begging people to understand you, you stop tolerating disrespect just to keep connection. You stop shrinking yourself so other people can stay comfortable. And the moment that happens, some people start acting like you changed too much. But the truth is, you're not becoming cold, you're becoming honest. A lot of relationships survive because one person keeps abandoning themselves to maintain peace. And when you finally stop doing that, people feel the difference. Not everybody benefits from your healing. Some people only knew the version of you that had no boundaries, the version that stayed quiet, the version that accepted crumbs, the version that constantly chose everyone else before themselves. But healing changes your spirit, and growth forces you to ask yourself, who am I when I stop living for approval? I think one of the biggest misconceptions is believing loneliness automatically means something is wrong. Sometimes loneliness is necessary. Sometimes God removes noise because He's trying to rebuild your identity without outside interference. And honestly, some of us have spent so much of our lives attached to chaos that peace feels unfamiliar, silence feels uncomfortable, stillness feels scary. Because when everything gets quiet, you finally hear yourself. And that's the moment healing really begins. Not when everybody claps for you, not when people validate you, not when social media notices you, but when you can sit alone with yourself and still know your worth. That's sovereignty. Healing isn't just losing people. Sometimes it's grieving old versions of yourself. The version that tolerated mistreatment because they were afraid to be alone. The version that thought love had to be earned. The version that felt responsible for fixing everybody. The version that stayed available to people who never showed up emotionally. And let me tell you something, survival versions of ourselves deserve compassion too, because they were trying to protect us with the understanding they had at the time. But eventually, God calls you higher, and you realize survival is not the same thing as living. One thing healing taught me is that peace is more valuable than attention. I no longer want relationships where I have to convince people to care. I no longer want to beg for consistency, beg for communication, to be considered. I think one of the saddest things we do as human beings is chase people who already stopped choosing us. And sometimes we do it because rejection triggers old wounds. But healing teaches you something powerful. Closure is not always a conversation. Sometimes closure is your decision to stop chasing what no longer pours into you. And yes, that can feel lonely. But temporary loneliness is better than lifelong self abandonment. Looking back at some of the hardest seasons of my life, I realized God was doing surgery in isolation. There were seasons where I lost people, lost comfort, lost familiarity, lost the version of me that depended on validation. And honestly, it hurt. But now I understand something I didn't understand before. God sometimes isolates you before purpose. Because if He elevated you before healing you, you would carry broken patterns into your next season. Isolation sharpened my discernment. Silence strengthened my relationship with myself. And pain taught me how to stop negotiating my soul for acceptance. So today I want you to ask yourself, what version of myself am I grieving while becoming someone stronger? And another question, who am I becoming now that I no longer need permission to exist authentically? Sit with that, journal it, pray about it, because becoming whole requires honesty. If you've been feeling lonely lately, maybe it's not because you're losing yourself. Maybe it's because you're finally finding yourself, and I know it hurts sometimes. I know growth can feel quiet, heavy, misunderstood. But don't confuse isolation with abandonment. Some seasons are not meant to entertain everyone. Some seasons are meant to rebuild you. Thank you for sitting with me today on Journal the Ear. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who's been struggling with healing, loneliness, or personal growth. You can listen every Wednesday on Spotify and YouTube. And remember, growth becomes lonely the moment you stop shrinking to keep other people comfortable. I'll see you next episode.